Knowledge precludes a lack of knowledge. Shame's all could have been found before the fact was discovered. Progression of any kind to me is a cycle of traps, encouraged by the need to liberate people from a previous, lesser trap. The universe feeds off of this horrific necessity. The thing then happens after you speak it, after becoming a thing it realized that it could do this. The thing happens. You do not know why it happens. Wanting to extricate emotion from the object, though still intricate and powerful, discernible, the left and right hemispheres collide. Yo! You wish to relegate the happening to scrounge for life in another corner of your mind and never return. It does return, with more details to collect like cancer beneath your skin. This deluge that leads back to the frets of your indulgence, twanging in the night. You indulge then in mystery. Cosmic qualms. They threaten to be proved, and then where would you be? If the unanswerable is answered, where could you go from there? Back to the details, which by this time have grown in their pain enough to nearly kill you. The past becomes clearer. Through the sieve of time you are purified. You become a dainty ghost, a man with a cataract, filling up the transparent eyeball with thick sand. So grand. So there it is, kids. Do not feel so bad for me. I can still see and touch and feel enough to drop emotion like this blue vase to the floor and feel the space of havoc in the clocks, tragic as though it would die, and yet lives. The mind remains unsatisfied by images. It needs not feelings alone, but also images. It needs to combine both and have both exist together as one thing. I do not think this can be. The only way for the object to fully understand its wealth is for the mind to understand. Wealth lies differently in the object than in the mind. The mind construes together a collage of wrong sensations that do not relate to the image, and yet it is all the mind can come up with for the moment, at least. Perhaps time will come when I can see the soul of an object. And see that soul the same as mine, and yet of a different material, a different physicality that shapes the ideal of one in their helpless nuance, of one in the variegations of thought that dangle out over the ledge of an infinite sum. And yet the object cannot be one with one who is not already a consciousness, extant between the lines of comprehension. And so the thing, the object of its own will, shall calibrate the scene and leave the viewer motionless in dreams and leave the image faint within itself, so that even if the mind and this vase upon the table were the same and spoke the same venerable hushes of two things shared, one would see then the object as not fully real, as it is the mind is not fully real, I guess, and thus to connect the mind by comprehension to the thing would make the thing no longer thing and make the mind more mind, unless the ghost of languor trapped within repose. And this close main of object to perception cannot be healed, since the presumptuous reasoning of my thought might drive me to think that nothing else could exist besides that and myself, and would leave the object that is gaped at without pause, between the understanding of it one way and a fake fathoming another way, which leads the object from the simple cues of the synapse. Deft mutability that cranks out words displaces the object from its canon of indecipherable distinctions and leaves the eye without a proper fiction. Why? Because there is no why or how or when, but only thus, as in what comes from something else, itself indirect and menacing, because the ending begins to fade into a new beginning that promises to end, but never does, and only was. So then, it appears I manhandle the infinite and injure it, but it still lingers on. Past progression, passing weekly the terms of its existence, the rules, passing them by. There's traffic on a highway. Each vehicle is a world in the place of another world that would have been had not the cycle made the choice to insert a physical thing into the science of a void. The silence penetrating my words speaks without the fat necessity, because there is no inflection, because true depth is silent. It grows from those endings that I was talking about, managing only to extend them until the extension by default becomes madness, nonsense, a potluck of symbols. each one more diminutive than the last, that is not last, but merely forever in the middle, becoming ponderous. And I know my words too well. They're too fast to break fully on the brink of ponderous hell. They will enter it, and weakness would fell the void like an ogre struck between the eyes. And suddenly I'm older, even though the metaphorical muck of time gets muckier and I get no luckier. The minute hatches and becomes lost like a bad question, badly asked and badly mistaken. The words are not to be trusted and lose value easily. The vacant pallor of your race leads me on, and finds my race and all races to be but faces. What masterful perdition should I construct? What insouciance could I feel from easily sustained, attained solution? The patent is expired. These hours of pursuit towards the middle, how insane the doctrines that came before. There is no truth to me, and truth in no primal way, only truth in a modern way that becomes primal, and thus this disappears. I do not pray, but if I tell you, if I did, I'd tell you every mouse that hides within the grandfather clock would be as useful and beautiful as God, held together with duct tape. Pull the lever and see what happens. There is no clean break. It breaks slow, these words, and tough. And when finally fucking separated, finds the fissure belated. I hope you can see what I'm trying to do, because I cannot. Well, I can, but only by typing as fast as my thoughts, which go too fast for my hands, and when they slow, I know I've reached a false land of peace, a black area. There are no bones in people, and no people in heads, and no heads on bodies, headless people. Perhaps the middle was reached a while ago. Just we didn't know we had reached it because it seemed so natural, so special to our cause, that it seemed an attachment rather than a revelation of mellifluous messiahs. They check their watch and understand the land and the hand that makes the land. But what else do what else do these spirits squander? What else could we give them? A gift that over time becomes a normalcy. The rift that catches itself before the brink, almost stumbling. A part of it falls over and evolves into nonsense that does not exist. And if it did exist, if something could be explained, which happens every day to everyone, though some handle it better, pull the lever and see what happens. You will find that nothing happens until you forget about it. And then the why and how are baubles in the brain, and now it has begun to rain. And now the drops are isolate flecks that tell you more of pain than why and how and when and all the rest. Everything is left again in this image of the rain. The image itself collides with whatever had once sustained it well above the nimbus, and and then all that exists is in that one image. Then only an image could exist as one thing, a thing that happens and drives down the gradient, the sharp incline, which only succeeds in getting much sharper. The thing happens, and all the world is in the womb of the happening, and each sum is a penetrating, a second rift in the latent stage that accumulates all the damned disjecta into a single gnome, a short, pissed-off thing of chance, withering, lost in the magic of the inanimate, warping the ground around which it was originally erected. All things aggregate. All things change before the stop, and the stopping is a peculiar horn that plays long, stubbly sonatas that lead nowhere, cross from one point to another, and I see the thing itself is the happening. The thing itself happens without recourse or choice. It just clams up into an object as I see it. The event, the act of order, is not orderly except in the thing. The red herrings, the secret ideas, ideas about the thing which happens. Yes, the thing indeed happens. And abruptly, but only for a little while, and softly disappears without objections. Everyone else in the room remains silent, so that the thing can properly resume its place in cacophony and be fully heard. Be barely heard. Be barely heard. It fizzles in the wake of tempted life, broken and diseased. This tragic drone of a thing. A feeling pervades and fizzles out, and then the thing had no longer suddenly happened. It always happened. It happened infinitely, and all the meaning I gave it is lost, all lost and dumb, and careless as the object that first presumed to exist, that first presumed to be summation of anything that could live. I seek God. I find only myself because I see God in myself. The vastness of myself is God. We are so much clay, unformed. I seek myself and find God, but a God that is apart from myself. As it is that I am apart from myself and struggle violently to link my soul to something that is apparent to me. All deities reside within the human breast. The idea of God, like the idea of myself, is an abstraction made privately applicable. In other words, the description I could give for who I am would seem alien to me, though it would also make sense. And the growth of such an idea is a spiritual provision for any of various multitudes. God becomes even more abstract and generates dispute and war. How could something that is so clear to the individual be so muddled when bloated to fit the ideals of the world? It is the same reason that I can see God in myself and yet fail to do this whenever I attempt to search for God. The deity is already located in myself, the soul, my nature. And if I try to relate such a private concordance to the external values and virtues of the world, it will not seem fitting, as I can only be myself. I cannot be other people, cannot feel the same as they, so God can only be itself, and cannot be others, and cannot feel the same. God is more rightly found in the individual. To search other places would be a wild goose chase, and yet I do not see myself as God, and yet I am God. Such is the level of cunning in the universe, whereby the origin of truth dwells in that which seems alien. For example, I say to someone, I'm very angry at you. And afterward, I think back on the situation and wonder, was I really angry at myself? Indeed, I had been angry at this person, but it had been fleeting. I should not still feel angry, and yet I was. But I also had not dealt with my own recent frustrations. Maybe I was projecting. The result of this thought was another thought. Could the fact that suddenly this idea popped into my head mean, rather, that my unconscious mind felt the need to chastise itself as a result of such frustrations, making me aware of unconscious will by presenting an hypothesis, itself an idea grown from the meaning behind a simple sentence that, in any case, I would not even have stumbled upon had I no prior knowledge of Freud and his Oedipal whatnot. Implications. The mind, I suppose, unconsciously informs, not in external ways that at first seem unrelated to us, but through whatever ideas we could glean ourselves as to the motives of these externals. Thoughts about thoughts, as though it needed to go a few steps before entering the conscious mind as something important that had to be addressed. In such a way, I patiently observe a truth about myself, and yet still see this truth as alien, because it is inspired by dwelling on an idea directed towards someone else. And yet I have no vision in my mind of how these words could be directed to anybody or anything. As regards to my opinion of anything, I voice my own. As I speak it seems alien to me and to my personal stance on things. I had just as well say that I had no opinions at all, and it would be the truer statement. Here's the ignorance of all you people, and how quickly you erect walls between the self and understanding through the forgery of a connection between that self and all the perceiving of a world that is made of law. In other words, each person is a blank slate and remains a blank slate until they die, at least in terms of opinion. In birth, I think we awaken to a world increasingly less tangible. We must supplant such nothingness with law, or else go rightly insane. However, we shall always know very much better the nothingness of our beginning.